When you have a show about gratitude, you've got to be grateful for your sponsors. And in our life of gratitude, we all have guides. Somebody that guided us through our lives, that made us appreciate those things that we have. And that's why I'm so delighted and so grateful for our sponsor, Life Guides. Life Guides is a peer-to-peer community that helps people navigate through their day-to-day stressors by providing a place of empathy, listening, wisdom, and support with a guide who has walked in your shoes, experiencing the same challenge or life experience as you. A true life guide. And because you're listening to our gratitude podcast, if you go to their website, lifeguides.com/schedule a demo and add the code HEALTHY2021. The code is HEALTHY2021 in the free text box. You'll get 2 months of their services for free. 2 months for free. So sign up, show your team you care, get a life guide, be grateful for those guides in your life, as I am grateful for our sponsor, Life Guides. Hey, welcome to Leading with Gratitude Live. I'm your host, Chester Elton, the apostle of appreciation, coming to you from the viral gratitude epicenter of the universe, Summit, New Jersey. We say, look, give us 30 minutes. We'll give you great information, great inspiration, and a roadmap to gratitude, not only at work, in your personal life. And it's all based on our Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Leading with Gratitude. And I always say our because I've got this remarkable writing partner, Adrian Gostek. I always say I'm the Robin to his Batman, is what I wanted to say. Hey, I want to introduce you to a new friend of mine. He's doing some remarkable work with kids, teachers, and their parents in a place called the U School. His name is Scott Schimmel, and I want to read his bio for you really quick. He's the president and chief guide. I love that title, chief guide, and co-founder of the U School. Scott covers every area of the organization, ensuring to deliver on their vision and mission. With a professional background in higher education, nonprofits, and leadership development, he designs curriculum, speaks frequently, writes, coaches, and consults with school leaders to create cultures where every kid thrives. He's the host of the U School's podcast and serves as the chief guide, training officer, equipping others to deliver the curriculum with integrity. He's been in education for 20 years, founded the U School 8 years ago. I'm excited to welcome to the show and introduce to you my good friend, new friend, Scott Schimmel. Wave to the crowd.
Hey, Chester. Thanks, man. I love your title, too. It's amazing.
Yeah, always good fun. Hey, we'll be asking a lot of questions, or we'll be taking a lot of questions. Put it in the chat box. Tell us where you're from. We always get this wonderful international audience. We'll answer as many questions as we can. Now, right when you go to Scott's website, at uschool.com, he asks this question, and I love it. He says, let me get it right. What if school prepared students to flourish and thrive, not just academically, but professionally in life? So that's a great question. So how do you do that in the U School, Scott?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think traditionally, even today, schools designed for academic success, and for good reason. Kids need to be prepared to think and to communicate and solve problems. And I think, though, if I take a step back and have a slightly cynical, realistic lens on it, it seems like school's actually preparing you to get into college. And then if you get into college and you do well there, what you're prepared for is to get a job. Right. And I've known quite a few people, I'm sure you have, who've done that and done that well. And yet 5 years, 10 years, 20 years into this career life, if they're honest, when they're honest, they would say, I am far from the life that I hoped I could have. I'm doing well financially. I did well academically. Is this it? And I think there's a whole formula there that deserves some examination, to say the least. And so we try to create the space inside schools so that, first of all, we're redefining what success looks like. And it's not just to get into college. It's not just to professionally successful, but it's to be prepared to lead a life that's meaningful.
You know, I love that approach, early on. And I think, your work in high school and with college students is so important because that's really where you find yourself. You've got a great quote. I love it. It says, to figure yourself out, you need to just go figure yourself out.
Yeah.
Now, you had a mentor that did that for you, that kind of was your awakening, if I'm not mistaken. Why don't you tell that story?
Yeah, I don't think I had had a conversation with an adult until I was like 20 years old, beyond where do I turn my homework in? What time is practice? And there was this guy that was an advisor to a student organization I was a part of as a college student. And a part of the due diligence for me to get accepted to be a leader was sitting down with him for coffee. And I never had coffee before. I never certainly had a coffee meeting with a grown man before. And I didn't know what to expect, didn't have an agenda, but he did. And his agenda was to get to know me and ask me a ton of questions. And I don't remember what questions he asked. I just remember at the end of that first coffee, I wanted to do it again. Someone was very invested in my life and curious about me and genuinely cared. And that coffee turned into years of coffees and an invitation into his life as he kind of inserted himself into mine. And through that relationship, I had a mirror back to me outside my family, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
A mirror back to me of what I'm capable of doing and how I could grow. And I trusted him and still do, and opened my eyes to, I think, how do you develop somebody's potential?
And it is interesting because, I looked at your degrees and stuff. You were going to go into finance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Whoops.
You're not doing that. So,
whoops.
What was this mentor? Was he the catalyst to make you to that awakening where you said, look, this isn't the life I want to live?
Yeah, that was a key part of it, was discovering. Actually, it wasn't really him discovering, it was him giving me the permission to go with things that I cared about. Because I think since I was little, I always wanted to be a teacher and be an educator. But in my family in South Orange County, California, where I grew up, that just didn't seem to be what was going to be like most respectable. It didn't make enough money, wasn't financially viable to support a family. But this older man, he's like, yeah, you're good at that. Why wouldn't you? And I started to kind of unpack, yeah, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I go down a path of caring for people and investing in their lives, especially students and young people? So that was a key part of it. And I think another part was watching my parents go through a divorce and start asking these pretty deep questions at 20, 21 of what kind of person do I want to be? And what kind of family do I want to create? And if I can work backwards, knowing the kind of family I want to create, what do I need to do now that would set me up for that? So I had this, I think, very early quarter life crisis before that was a thing. And fortunately had people around me that I could bounce some ideas around and wrestle with some deep questions.
Yeah, and it is so interesting. We were chatting a little earlier. There's something about, and you mentioned it earlier, there's something about having a mentor, somebody you trust outside your family.
Right.
In family dynamics, there's always a lot of emotion. There can be a lot of drama. And certainly there are some parents who do it really well. Right. And yet there are those of us that struggle with that. And that outside influence is really important. I really just wanted to say hi. We got such an international audience here today. We've got Argentina and Ecuador, Nigeria, somebody from Canada, where I grew up. You got to love that, eh? India, Dubai, Morocco.
New Mexico.
There you go.
Sounds international.
Yeah, it's not new and it's not Mexico. I don't know how to put your answers or put your questions in the chat box, because if you've got any questions about education and meaningful education, Scott is the guy. I noticed in your resume that for 10 years you worked with InterVarsity as a faith-based coach. Talk to me a little bit about how did your faith direct your teaching and this mission, or did it?
Yeah, it did. I think my understanding of faith, especially in the Christian worldview, is this idea that I'm made in God's image, which means I've got a lot of potential inside me, a lot of capacity. If I'm made like God, then how come I'm acting like this? How come my life is like this? And so in many ways, it's a lens to look at everybody and say, you've got a lot more to tap into. It involves, though, getting unlocked. And so a part of walking in my faith has been, so how do we do this? How do we do this well, where it's not just some sort of ticket to get you into heaven, but a life lived now that is full and vibrant and where you thrive. And I think the scriptures, particularly the Christian scriptures in the New Testament, talk a lot about three concepts: faith, hope, and love. And if you've got those, if you've formed those, if they're clear to you and they kind of energize your life will go better. And so faith, hope, and love, those are translatable concepts anywhere. What do you put your faith in? What do you believe in? What's most important to you? I think in education, we call that identity formation. What is your identity? What do you believe in? Who are you? What forms you?
Right.
And then your purpose, obviously, the hope. If you don't have a sense of my life here counts, I can solve problems, I can add value, I think you'll be hopeless. And so this whole pursuit that we've seen towards your why, towards purpose, towards why am I here? What can I do to contribute is a big deal. But as the scriptures teach too, St. Paul says the greatest of those three things is love. So
Right.
you can have a great career. You can be very formed in your values and your beliefs. But if you don't have people that you lean on and know, and they trust you, and I think your life will feel pretty void. So I think what's most important from a faith perspective is love. You experiencing love and giving love. And so it's kind of everything I do comes through that lens. I just have learned to translate, I think. So people don't get weary of me. I'm not carrying my faith towards anybody with an agenda, but it definitely shapes everything.
And it's so interesting to me, in our work, with gratitude and leadership and so on, we've had the chance to travel the world. And regardless of your faith, I find those people that believe in a higher power, and it doesn't matter, if it's Christian, if it's Islam, if it's, some of the Asian, but Buddhism, I've got a lot of friends that are practicing Buddhist. This idea that we are part of a bigger community and that we've got a bigger purpose seems to be such a strong and guiding purpose. I'm so glad that you brought that up. I want to talk to you about, you talk about social emotional learning. That's something I've never heard of in in school.
Yeah.
So talk to me about what that's like, and then I want to get to Emilio in Paris. He's got a great non-traditional education. But talk to us first about this.
Yeah.
This special learning, social emotional learning. I'm curious.
It's a phrase. It's a phrase that's kind of made its way into education 4 or 5 years ago. And when we started U School 8 years ago, it wasn't necessarily a phrase. I remember being in a meeting with the principal, sharing with him what I do. And he said, hey, and he turned to his vice principal and said, is that the conference we just went to? Is this social emotional learning that you're doing? And I, those are familiar terms. I said, yeah. And I remember I went out to the parking lot, Googled social emotional learning, and there's this research paper that said, we've been in education focusing on test scores and graduation rates for a long time, decades, and we're only seeing little tiny squeaks of increase no matter where we go or what we try. But there's these little skunk works projects at schools and districts where we're actually caring about kids, and we're giving them space in the school day to talk about their personal lives. And we're seeing phenomenal results on their test scores and on their graduation rates. And so 5 years ago, it was this buzz. What is social emotional learning? It's what a good teacher always does. You put a kid first, you recognize there's something going on in their lives. There's always more to the story, and you create personal connections. But the term social emotional learning has become, it's an industry now. It's training, it's curriculum, it's equipping teachers and parents how to do this kind of work with kids, which to me is just kind of how you do it, how you do life. But it's a whole industry now, SEL, social emotional learning.
Very cool. So you can see Emilio's question there, Emilio Paris, about Montessori school and non-traditional education. And we're happy. What's your vision about that type of education?
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with Montessori, except I understand at a young age it's play based and it's experiential. And Sir Ken Robinson, who just passed away sadly, I think a week or two ago, is a great TED speaker and author. He's been leading the charge for the past 20 years, saying, why do we keep doing education the same way? Rows, batches, age groups. It's a very machine kind of industrial revolution model. And that's not how people grow. People are organic and they're custom built. So I think Montessori has been one of the shining lights for a long time. They've been around for a long time of saying, let's just do this differently. Let's come alongside a kid and figure out who they are and release them to explore their curiosity and their creativity. So I love, from what I know, I love Montessori. I think there's a lot there to learn, but it's the question then becomes, how do you scale that to a public school system? And that's beyond me.
It's interesting because, you even talk about education in the workplace and you say, we gamify it, make it fun, make it engaging. So, taking Montessori to IBM,
Yeah, right. Totally.
So, you work with older students, if I'm not mistaken, high school and college. Is that
Yeah.
true? So you talk a lot about self-reflection. Why is that so important?
Well, for many reasons, I think research shows that when we take the time to write out our thoughts, externalize, process out loud, or in writing what we're going through, what we're experiencing, what we're thinking, there's some amazing things that create efficiencies in our brains. We can help connect dots. We can see patterns. We can be more confident about the choices we're making. But I think, to answer your question, I think I've seen the lack of self-reflection in enough older adults to know how bad it gets if you don't establish that habit early. And I think we have an opportunity with teenagers to help them learn this is just normal. This is what you do. You think about who you are, what you're experiencing. You're thoughtful about it. You shift gears. You are vulnerable in trying out new things and new ideas and new assumptions. And then you think about it again there too. And I think people want to do it, but if you create a pattern where you don't have the opportunity to, I think people just switch to an autopilot mode and go through their life. And I think that's a big waste. So it's a huge opportunity to teach kids how to do it in every class. It's not just English. It's not just for homeroom. I've got one of my best friends is a math teacher, and he creates space in his curriculum during the school day to invite kids to process what they're going through, what they're learning about themselves through math, through hard problems. And he said it's to the expense of doing another drill with them, which is what I'm supposed to do according to the curriculum. But he said, I've found that if I give kids a space to think and talk, they do better. They do better and their results show it. So it just makes sense to do it.
And I'll share with you, in our research on leadership, it's really interesting to me that every great business leader that we've ever studied, they all were self-reflective, to the point where not only did they hold themselves accountable at the end of the day, they would purposely take time off and go to a retreat.
Right.
We said he did actually go to a monastery where he took a vow of silence for a week.
Wow.
Geez, I don't know if I could do that. That'd be
yeah.
And yet he's been doing it for 20 years. And he says, that quiet time, that reflective time is so helpful because it does keep you on track. As you said, with your career going into finance, it's just what everybody did. It wasn't what you were passionate about.
Right.
It's what you did.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a great question from Emily Orton, who's a great educator as well, by the way. Let's see what she says here. 1998 book, The Book of Learning. Forgetting my educator, Frank Smith, gets very clear on this before the term social emotional learning was used to describe the fact that we learn best from people we want to be like, and we most often want to be like people who care about us. Right. Love what you're doing. Yes,
common sense.
You wanted to spend more coffee with your friend because he cared about you.
Right. That's right. I remember hearing a student say last year, she said out loud, and she never thought of this before, but she said out loud, she said, yeah, there's a teacher that I know, and I don't even like his class. I'm not even good at his subject, but I really like him. And so I do my best. I tried the hardest. And I just thought, as she's kind of discovering that, wouldn't that be great for all the teachers who say, I'm not here to build relationships. I'm here to teach curriculum. I'm here to get you to pass the AP test. I'm not here to be your friend. I'd just say, hey, well, I understand that. Maybe you're just that kind of personality. But if you really wanted them to be more successful, you would build the personal relationship. And I think it's kind of funny when we have to put that into research. It's like research is showing us something that's common sense to everybody. But good, at least we've researched it.
We talk about that, and more carrots, less sticks, right?
Yeah.
Be kind, and you say, well, it's common sense, and yet uncommonly practiced.
Right. Yep.
We had a conversation about this before the show about technology, and I love Luna's question here. How can we use technology as an enabler for education now that we can have personalized curriculum for each student? However, we do not see the education system as changing at the same pace. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a massive accelerated disruption right now, as I've got 3 kids in our house, right, that are on Zoom calls on 3 different grade levels because we're doing virtual school for probably the year, at least in our district. It's accelerating the entire system to figure out how do we do education instruction well online. I think what I've heard as a theme from a lot of adults, from teachers and educators, is, hey, we're all Zoom fatigued. This isn't going to work.
Right.
And I think I understand that on some level, but I think what we're actually saying is we are fatigued of bad Zooms. We're fatigued of bad instruction delivered online, because I've had I'm having a great connecting time with you right now through technology. There's no question that kids connect with people on technology, Fortnite, TikTok, Snapchat. Like so I think the better question is, how do we do this really well, so that it enables and allows us to build the kinds of relationships that we want to have? And I think for me, it goes a lot back to reflection. Rather than doing silly icebreakers with kids to try to gauge their interest, what are we going to do so that we can have thoughtful, provocative questions to kids about what they're experiencing? And I believe they want to share that. I believe they want to hear their peers talk about that. And they want to have a safe space to just think about these things. If not school, I don't know where else it would be.
Yeah. More information, obviously, at uschool.com. I've got the website right?
Uschool.com.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you, you have a great question you ask your students. You say, and I love it here, you say, did your parents live their dream, or did they settle?
Oh,
that opens a lot of Pandora's box. And you talk about, living your dream, or living the right story and telling the story. How do you get people, because I'm rambling here a little bit. I want to get to a couple of points. One is that, you're helping students. You're also helping teachers and parents, right? So this provocative question to your parents, did you settle? How did that go over?
Well, that's typically a question we actually ask in parent forums about their parenting, because the point we're trying to make is what you've been saying all along, that this whole idea about life well lived is something you catch. It's not taught, it's caught, that whole idea. And the best research I've seen, and this definitely supports by common sense, in order for a kid to make it well in the transition to live life well as a healthy, thriving adult, they need a bunch of adults around them. They need to be able to see it, watch it. That's what that mentor did for me. I got to see it in 3D. And the best research says it's actually one kid probably needs about 5 adults that are not just on stage, but interacting with that kid. So that becomes a math issue. And teenagers, as we know, pull away from their adults, from any adult really, but particularly their parents, and they want to look towards their peers. But school is this opportunity where we can say, well, that's all good and well, but this is time and space where you have to interact with adults. So back to that whole, did your parents settle? What we're trying to put the pressure on is parents of kids today to say, there is a spotlight on you. If you want your kids to be happy, but you've never demonstrated what that looks like, what are you doing? Let's just see the breakdown there. And it's never too late. Now would be a good opportunity for you to go on a journey as a parent at 40 or 50 and let your kids watch you go on a deep dive to figure out who you are and how to reorganize your life towards your best self. And then the lens we use a lot is story. I think it's been a helpful lens for a lot of people, but particularly young people, to see, I want to look at my life through the lens of story. It actually helps facilitate that self-reflection, to look in third person. I think if you're a character in a story and you're the main character, what's it telling? Where's it going? Yeah. And try to play that out. If you're on the trajectory right now, your parents are probably a pretty good indication of where you're going to end up. How do you feel about that? And what would you change if you could change anything? And it just helps, I think, ground some urgency when a teenager says, I got my whole life ahead of me. And we're trying to say, well, yeah, sort of. But the choices you make right now are going to determine where you end up 20, 30 years from now.
And part of your curriculum that we talked about that of course is near and dear to my heart is you have a whole curriculum on gratitude.
Yeah.
And that really is interesting. You talk about life well lived and relationships and so on. I don't think you can go through a life well lived and surround yourself with good people and not be grateful for those experiences. So tell me a little bit about your curriculum on gratitude.
Well, it comes from that same place as for an 18-year-old. If you're sending an 18-year-old out of your house into the world and they never say thank you, just on a fundamental parent level, you'd think, man, what did you do wrong? Because that's what we do when we complain about our friends' kids and they don't say thank you when they're over at our house. Like, whoa, what's going on in that house? But we know that if it's not just about manners, it's about a lifestyle, it's about a mindset. And there's also really, really good research. There's a friend of mine, Dr. Glenn Fox from USC. He says he's the first guy to put the brain under an fMRI machine as people are practicing gratitude to see what happens on the inside of our brains. And it turns out gratitude makes you happier from a mental health standpoint. It makes you healthier from a physical standpoint, makes you way better to be around, and you're wiser. You can see patterns in your life if you're practicing gratitude. So what if we just taught kids how to do that, but not from, hey, research says, and you should, but to actually give them the experience, which is our version of curriculum.
Yeah.
So let's go practice gratitude and then reflect afterwards. How did that make you feel? And what would this be like to make this a habit and a practice in your life? We do a silly thing at our family every dinner. It's just called the 3 good things exercise. And it's just over quarantine. It's like my 7-year-old's usually the one that says, all right, 3 good things. And she shares about 14 good things for the day. But I tell you, when I'm done with the day and I've had a bad day, the last thing I want to do is talk about 3 good things. But there's something about saying, well, I had a good sandwich at lunch and I did talk to a friend for a couple of minutes. That was good. And it just pulls you out of whatever you've been in and helps us connect. And so not only is it a better way to live, it actually says if you practice it, your whole life's going to go better.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. There's a great book on that called Leading with Gratitude.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Who knew?
And you know what? There's actually, that's one of our take it home principles is, what are your 3 things? I love this question from Vinod. He says, while it's possible to have a global curriculum for subjects like science or history, is it really feasible to have a global standard curriculum for values and culture? Or should it be different for different geographies and demographics?
I think it's a great question. And that's oftentimes what we get asked before we bring curriculum to schools. What's our perspective? What's our point of view? And certainly I have a point of view, as we talked about our faith a little bit earlier. But I think what works better is to ask questions. And then, therefore, we can go cross cultures and say, I'm not coming in with any agenda. It's, what do you think? What's most important to you? And I think the more important question then is, why is that important to you? And where does that come from? And what's that going to do for your life? And there's an old Japanese management principle. We're going to ask the 5 layers of why. That's one thing we do with students. Okay, you said, let's say, truthfulness is important to you. Why? And they'll say, well, because it's important to be truthful. Why? And then when they get down to the 4th or 5th layer, they're actually thinking it through. Well, it'll make me a more honest person, help me sleep at night, and help my relationships be stronger. Yeah. I mean, they've thought this through. And then we come back and say, so is that, now that you've thought it through, is that really important to you? And I'm very happy with that. It just turns out no matter what culture we're in, it seems like the direction of students is towards the same values you and I would care about: love, hope, peace, generosity, kindness, self-control. It's all, so I'm not worried about what a kid comes up with. It's just the process to get them there.
Hey, I knew this would happen. We're going to run out of time. We're not going to get to some of the things I wanted to talk about, like your work with the Navy SEALs. You do have a free offer for our listeners, though. And I love it when guests come and say, here's some tools on how to do it. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we have these really deep dive courses that will walk you through the entirety of your life. But we found that can be intimidating for somebody, whether they're 15 or 50. And so we've got a short one, and it's called the Real Me course. And the promise is, if you do the work, it might take you 40 minutes, might take you 20, it might take you 2 hours. If you do the work of these 3 short exercises, you will get more clarity about who you are. And you will find yourself experiencing more peace. And on the other side, you'll probably be agitated in a good way, because you realize, man, if that's really who I am, I think I might need to change some things. So that's the commitment, is if you do this work for free, you'll be at peace and agitated. So I'm not sure if that sells, but it's true. And if you want it, it's on our website. It's really easy, video-based course, super short and easy to do.
That's great. theuschool.com. Great stuff. And you've got a podcast as well. So listen, tune in. We're in our last 2 minutes here. We've had some other questions. We're going to go in and answer those after the show, and you can play the replay. I love that we broadcast not only on LinkedIn, but it's Facebook, it's YouTube, it's Twitch, who, we actually have 1 follower on Twitch, and it's my son. So we love to wrap up the show with the question. We've got a fun little campaign on LinkedIn. It's #FindYourGratitude. So where did you find your gratitude today?
Well, I'm so grateful every time I get to have a thoughtful conversation about kids. So I'm grateful you reached out and you're interested in that. It's not just to give me a platform, but I think what if we all oriented our lives towards the next generation, and not just because they deserve it or they need it, but it's for me. Every time I'm with kids or think about students, it pushes me to find my better self and to model the life that I want to live. And I imagine a world where kids get to graduate from high school and they're ready. They know their answers to these big life questions. So I'm grateful for that.
That's great. Well, listen, I love stories of gratitude. I love educators. There's a lot more to learn. Make sure you go to theuschool.com. Follow Scott on LinkedIn. As always, we encourage a life of gratitude. Look us up at leadingwithgratitudebook.com. Follow us on LinkedIn. We've got a wonderful monthly newsletter. We should get you to contribute to that, Scott, because
I would love to. Yeah,
a lot to say. It comes out once a month. Sign up for that. Well, as we wrap up in our last 30 seconds here, we really hope that we've given you 30 minutes or 8, information, some inspiration, some tools and a roadmap to a life of gratitude. Not only is it a better way to lead, as Scott has testified, as we say, it's a better way to live. I really hope that through all of this COVID that we're a little more grateful, we're a little more kind, we're a little more patient, and we're a little more forgiving of each other. And on that note, as your apostle of appreciation and Scott at the U School, we wish you a day full of gratitude, and we're grateful for the time you spent with us.
Thanks,
Take care. Be well, everybody. Wave to the crowd. We'll see you. Bye-bye.